So top five dungeon crawler slash RPG slash fantasy board games. That's what I wanted to push out here with a brief how, why, when, where, what for each of the games, why I've selected them in my collection. And up to my archive, I've pushed out in a lot more detail my thoughts on these board games. And really for me, this is the eternal question with all board games. How much play, how much table time is it going to get? Is this something that you're going to play every other week with the group or solo? Is it something that you're going to play every now and then? Or is it something that just it's going to sit on your shelf and taunt you? So in pushing out these reviews, it's more of the mechanics, it's more of the flow, it's more of the place that it has in my collection than, hey, here's how you actually play the game. Because there's a lot of other great YouTube videos and channels that cover it. These are 5 games, and it was hard because if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, I love dungeon crawlers. I love fantasy-type board games. I like that idea of a D&D universe, stepping into it. And I wanted to keep these 5 currently in print, although one is sci-fi, but it is still kind of a dungeon. These are games that are currently in print. So if you want to check them out, the acquisition, it's not like you're trying to hunt down something that's OOP and go down that path. So I guess let's start at 5 and work our way back. Number 5, Gloomhaven. Gloomy. I mean, the content in this box is amazing. Not to mention, we've got the second part coming out. We've got the smaller part. We've got other expansions. We're just looking at Gloomhaven itself. It's amazing because massive replay value, tons of adventures, fully developed campaign, characters that you can augment through cards and playing different combinations. The discovery system itself is amazing. You basically have a blank map and you put these stickers on it as you travel around and uncover the story. And characters get unlocked. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but you start out with base characters. And then as you achieve quest goals and other aspects of the game, you unlock more characters. That alone is very, very addictive. The dungeon crawlers themselves, it's a dungeon delve. You go in, you've got a mission, you've got treasure, you've got to manage resources. It works. It's fantastic. It's nowhere near flawless. And I say that. The reason why it's number 5 on the list and not number 1. I mean, remember, these are my top 5. So even being on 5 is pretty impressive. Gloomhaven's a beast. Gloomhaven is a game that you set up and you play and you enjoy. You leave it for a while, you play for a while. Gloomhaven's the type of thing, if you're playing with friends, when we were making our way through Gloomhaven, it was the type of thing we're going to spend all Saturday and most of Saturday night playing. And I enjoyed every moment of it, absolutely. But it's not the type of game that you just casually unfold and play. It's not necessarily the type of thing that you bring to the gaming club for 2 or 3 hours. I have. But that's not, this is a game that requires dedication and play and time. It's an amazing solo game. I mean, for the price of admission, about now $100 USD, maybe a little more, a little bit less. I mean, just absolute insanity with what it's worth. But it is a major, major commitment. So that's why it's number 5. Number 4, Blackstone Fortress. Blackstone Fortress is set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So going in, the reason why this is number 4 is the fact the narrative explains it, the books explain it, the history explains it. I mean, the game explains itself, what's going on. But the Warhammer 40,000 miniature game and universe, it's very nuanced. I mean, you kind of have to know what's going on for things to make sense. Because you're like, wait, I'm playing a space knight with a sword, but I've also got a plasma gun, and I'm running through a dungeon that's like a sci-fi fortress. I mean, it only makes sense in the Warhammer 40K universe. What has captured my imagination in Blackstone Fortress. Yes, it's got the 40K theme. Yes, I'm a massive Warhammer 40K player, so it feels at home. But this is the type of game, first of all, it's sci-fi dungeon crawler, and we don't really have many of those. But it works because you're this band of adventurers. You're going into the Blackstone Fortress to try and discover lost technology for the Imperium, for your faction. And there's 4 vaults, and you have to explore the vaults. You don't know where they're going to appear. Then in the central vault, there's an artifact. I won't say what that artifact is, but the game is ever shifting. So the rooms that you populate randomly generate from cards. There's random encounters. There's random items. After a dungeon, after an exploration on the Blackstone Fortress, you go back to this space station, you level up, you do some trading, you figure out your characters, there's character development. It feels like a living ecosystem. It feels like I'm in the Blackstone Fortress and the fortress has its own AI. It's the usual Games Workshop. Rules are okay. You're rolling some dice and you're moving miniatures. It's an interesting take on it. But the reason why I say it's number 4, and there's lots of expansions, and the expansions are top-notch, production value top-notch. The reason why I say it's number 4, you kind of have to know 40K. But for what it does, boy, it really does it fantastically. Number 3, Massive Darkness. Massive Darkness. Now, as of this podcast, as of this vlog, there is going to be soon, I think August, I think the end of the summer, a Massive Darkness 2. That's Kickstarter. It's going to be, the Kickstarter will happen. It'll be, a year and a half out. There'll be delays, 2 years out. Massive Darkness 1 still has massive value. What I love about Massive Darkness is you go into a dungeon. There's lots of miniatures and monsters that populate. You bash on them. You get loot. It works. The mechanics, it's a dice chucker, but the mechanics work. The two things that I find really innovative about it. Yes, there's a campaign, but independent play, scenario play is where it's at. This is the first dungeon crawler, in my mind, that you start out as a character and you literally level up as you move through sections of the dungeon. This section is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and each tier gives you experience on an experience tree that you can unlock new powers, while at the same time you discover new and more powerful magic items. You level up very fast. In the course of an hour and a half to 2 hours of play, you go from D&D terms, starting at level 1, ending at level 15. Some people say that's overpowering, but I kind of enjoy it. When I want that full D&D dungeon crawler experience, this levels you up. What I also really like about it, you open a room, there's minions in there, they attack, they do stuff, but there's also roaming boss monsters. There's a really amazing amount of diversity. These boss monsters, and they have unique personalities, unique attack abilities. They'll randomly spawn at different points in the dungeon. So you lay out the dungeon, and maybe all the way on the other side, this random monster spawns. And it starts making its way towards where you are, turn after turn after turn. Maybe you're halfway through the dungeon, and at the entrance, a random monster spawns. So it's a really interesting boss mechanic, and sometimes at the end of the dungeon, you fight one of these bosses. But it's kind of neat to have them randomly spawning, randomly walking around. You figure, do you deal with them? Do you not deal with them? Do you ignore them? Some have some amazing loot. Some are really tough. Some are easier, although none are easy. Massive Darkness just does it. Massive Darkness is just does it really, really well. Number two, Dark Souls. Now, I should, put a little footnote here. Dark Souls does really well what it does. You go through a dungeon, you beat on some minions, you get some souls, you get some random loot drops, you level up, and then from there you fight a mini-boss. You then go into another dungeon, beat on more minions, although harder now. You fight a main boss, and then you move to a mega-boss. It is pure tactical combat. It is pure leveling up. It is pure grinding. It feels like Diablo. It's the closest game. And I've asked this question numerous times. Just create a Diablo the board game and sell the board game, and then from there sell random packs of gear and cards and items. So you buy the game, and then for like $15 a pack, you keep on buying these packs and item sets and just make them completely random. And just how is that? How is there not a Diablo the board game? I mean, that's just insane. This is the closest thing. Dark Souls is the closest thing. I know Dark Souls fans are immediately like, Fritz, it is nowhere near like Diablo. You have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not talking about the IP itself. The Dark Souls universe is an entirely different thing. But you can go into the Dark Souls the board game, and you don't really need to understand any of it to play it. It's a good solid dungeon crawl. I would say it works solo. It wants to play solo because much of the game is grinding. Going through, running through a dungeon, beating on the minions, resting at the bonfire, reset. Fight the same minions again. Now, they're controlled by AI on the cards. The cards tell you what the minions do. Some are a little sophisticated, some not so sophisticated. The boss fights, the mini-boss and the mega-bosses, they have a deck of AI cards. And they get pretty sophisticated with how they attack and what they do. And especially if you've been playing real time, an hour and a half, making a boss run, winner take all, you get killed. You got to be ready to be like, I died. You died on there. So it's an interesting thing. It wants to play mainly solo because of the grindy nature. You really got to see with the group that you're playing with. But that is number 2. Number 1. Rune Bount. This is not a dungeon crawler. This is kind of an overland adventure game. But in terms of play, it's got some interesting features. It's got some novel features, but it works. And out of my entire collection, this is the game I've played the most. I continue to play the most. And if you were like, Fritz, bring over a dungeon crawling game to play, this is what I would bring. And that's not to say I don't enjoy the other games, but Rune Bount hits on a lot of different points. Those points are, you have a board, and there's places to explore on the board that mark kind of adventure points. Some of them are combat. You can pick. Some of them are combat. Some of them are quest-based, like visit this place and bring this artifact or do this here and there. Or a social situation. You encounter someone socially and how to resolve a quest. How do you interact? So right away with the characters that you select, and you get experience when you complete one of these adventure tokens. You get gold, and you, of course, can spend that. Right away, it gives you 3 ways to deal with things. Run around and bash everything in. Do a mix of all the quests, which is what I usually do. Or it's possible to play the game and never really get into combat, to just go around exploring lost ruins, lost places, interacting with the social aspects and NPCs of the game. Is that the most viable strategy? It is a strategy. Some of the characters are geared up to do that. So it's kind of neat to have the option to bash everything, but not always have to bash everything. Moving to there, you get gold. And now you go into towns and cities and you buy stuff. And the way you buy things, combat is linked to the gear. You have these discs, these little runes that have markings on them, pogs. You pick up your pogs, you shake them up, you throw them on the table. Some are hits, some are combos, some are miss, some are blocks. You do the same for the monsters, and then you resolve it, going back and forth, activating. So it's not just a D6 or roll dice. It's these custom pogs. And each character has different abilities on them. When you buy magic items, you buy a magic sword. Maybe on one side of this disc, it has 2 damage, and on the other side, a block. That magic item, you now add that disc, that rune, that pog to your hand. And this is the first game where when I bought a magic item, especially if it's like 15 gold, I'm slogging all around the realms, hitting everybody up that I can for all the gold that I can. I buy a magic item. In a lot of games, it just kind of gets marked somewhere, sword +3 of whatever. Well, now you physically get something you pick up, you hold, you manipulate, you look at it. It's got the little picture on it. You feel really kind of cool, like you earned it. It's a nice feature with all the magic gear and items. The quests itself. Now, in the base game, there's 2 quests. One where a dragon lord is resurrecting, reawakening. There's a timer. So you have X number of turns before the Dragon Lord awakes. So you have to decide how to best use those turns and gather information and gather clues. And then you have a final showdown. The second is Vorkash. He's a necromancer. He's resurrecting zombies. You have to kind of stop those zombies from attacking. And then at some point, you're going to face the necromancer. And the timer works really well with the game, because it forces you to not only make decisions, but it forces you to know we're going to sit down and play Rune Bount, and in 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours, we're going to have a nice little role-playing experience, adventuring experience, fight a boss, maybe win, maybe lose, level up, get some gear. I was going to say roll some dice, but throw some pogs. It just really, really works for me. So those are my top 5. Other mentions that are out there that just are really good. Descent, 2nd edition, I love. Kingdom Death Monster. But these are games that require a major commitment, or they're out of print, or they're a little bit harder to obtain, or the entry point is kind of what if. These 5, as of right now, are in print, are available. And as always, being a massive dungeon crawler enthusiast, Mage Knight was close. I know I can see a couple of the PMs and DMs I'm going to get where it's like, Fritz, you hating on Mage Knight? I mean, you play the game all the time. No, Mage Knight is a beast in itself. We've got to kind of learn. We got to kind of look at. What about Pathfinder, the adventure card game? I play that like crazy. I do. That was close. That's like number 6 on the list. So maybe I would have been better doing a top 10. But this is my top 5 starting point. Where is your top 5 starting point?